In our last video on the history of the Sith, we discussed the Jedi Civil War and the fall of Darth Revan's Sith Empire. We discussed how beyond all hope, Revan was redeemed and slew Darth Malak, his former apprentice, helping the Republic crush the Sith at the Battle of Rakata Prime. Thus, the Jedi Civil War ended in a Republic victory, but this victory was a Pyrrhic one. The Republic was left on the verge of collapse. The Jedi Order was nearly destroyed, and though the Jedi Civil War destroyed the Sith Empire, the Sith themselves had survived. In the years that followed, they would regroup and wage a shadow war against the Jedi, a war they nearly won. In this video, we'll be telling its story.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
In the last episode, we discussed the unique structure of Revan's empire, that of a strictly hierarchical military alliance over which the Sith had complete control. Under Revan and Malak, this structure allowed the Sith to conquer a third of the Republic, but after the Battle of Rakata Prime, the whole system collapsed. At Rakata Prime, the Sith not only lost the Starforge, but also Darth Malak, all of the highest ranking Sith apprentices and Darth Jedi, Admiral Varko and the leading commanders of the Sith Armada, and a huge portion of the Sith fleet. The entire senior leadership of the Sith Empire was wiped out. In the wake of this catastrophic defeat, the Sith did what they did best. They destroyed each other. The Sith Empire plunged into a civil war of its own, fracturing under the leadership of warlords and would-be Dark Lords of the Sith. Over the course of just a year, the Sith Empire disintegrated and the Republic rapidly reclaimed nearly all of its lost territory. By 3955 BBY, a year after the Battle of Rakata Prime, the Republic military had pushed all the way into the heart of Sith space, planning to lay siege to Korriban and snuff out what remained of the Sith. But they found the planet lifeless. The city of Dreshte had been abandoned, and the Sith Academy was in ruins. From the Sith corpses that littered the planet, the Republic determined that the Sith had wiped themselves out, though they found evidence that at least one Sith Lord had escaped Korriban and fled deep into the Outer Rim. The Sith Empire, the Republic arrogantly concluded, had ceased to exist. But the Republic's troubles weren't over yet. It barely survived the Jedi Civil War, as had the Jedi Order itself, and it struggled to rebuild. The redeemed Revan, who could have helped give the Republic a hero to rally around, disappeared, heading into the unknown regions in search of a terrible threat that he had begun to remember. And though the Sith Empire had indeed been destroyed, the Sith themselves had not. After the fall of Korriban, they had fled to the most remote reaches of Sith space, and the strongest among them gathered on a lonely world far from the Republic's reach. They came to Malachor 5, the last battlefield of the Mandalorian Wars, where their order took a new form. At the end of the Mandalorian Wars, Malachor 5 was destroyed by the Mass Shadow Generator, a Republic superweapon meant to annihilate the Mandalorian fleet. The mass death caused by the weapon was so great that it created a wound in the Force centered on Malachor 5, a wound that was made worse by the Traya's Academy, an abandoned stronghold of the ancient Sith that lay at the heart of the planet. During the Jedi Civil War, the Sith had used Malachor 5 as a secret stronghold, sending captured Jedi there to be broken. When Korriban fell, it was there that the Sith regrouped. At Malachor 5, the Sith came under the rule of the three greatest Sith Lords to emerge from the ashes of Revan's empire: Darth Sion, Darth Nihilus, and Darth Traya. Sion was the self-proclaimed Lord of Pain, a Sith marauder who was able to survive any wound through the use of the dark side. His body was covered in innumerable scars, and his bones had been shattered thousands of times. But he quite literally held himself together through the Force, drawing on his constant pain to survive. Sion was a committed Jedi hunter, the leader of a sect of assassins looking to wipe out the Jedi. Darth Nihilus, the Lord of Hunger, was a walking wound in the Force, an extension of Malachor that had been created when the planet died. He was a black hole in the Force, more of an entity than a living being, and he consumed all life around him, killing with his mere presence. He was motivated by constant hunger for the Force, and he was capable of consuming entire planets at a time. Nihilus was the master of a fleet of wrecked ships that he tore from the gravity well at Malachor 5, crewed by half-living Sith troopers that became mere extensions of his will. But in the Sith Triumvirate that formed in the Traya's Academy, both Sion and Nihilus were junior partners, the apprentices of Darth Traya, the Lord of Betrayal. Once, she'd been a Jedi Master, and long ago, she had trained Revan himself in the ways of the Force. She'd been exiled by the Jedi and become enthralled by the teachings of the Sith in the Traya's Academy, of which she became the Master. She trained Sion and Nihilus to have greater control over their abilities, and together with them, she oversaw the next stage of the old Sith Wars, the Dark Wars. Traya believed that Revan's Sith Empire had the wrong priority. The Republic, she claimed, was insignificant. To her and the other surviving Sith Lords, the only thing that mattered was destroying the Jedi. It was all that had ever truly mattered, they believed, for if the Jedi were destroyed, then the Sith would be forever victorious, no matter if the galaxy was ruled by a republic or an empire. Thus, the Sith Triumvirate abandoned the strategy of direct war against the Republic, instead choosing to wage a series of shadow wars to weaken it and destroy the Jedi. As part of this campaign, Nihilus and Sion carried out the first Jedi Purge, seeking to wipe out the Sith's greatest enemies once and for all. After the end of the Jedi Civil War, there were barely 100 Jedi left in the galaxy, their numbers devastated by defections to the Sith and Revan's assassins. But the Triumvirate began quietly whittling away at even that 100. Sion and his assassins hunted down and slew dozens of Jedi, and wherever groups of Jedi gathered, Darth Nihilus came for them, sensing their presence through the Force and feeding on them and the planets where they gathered. In 3952 BBY, what remained of the Jedi Order gathered on the planet Qatar to try and determine what was attacking them, only for them to draw out Nihilus. He consumed Qatar, killing the Jedi and all other life on the planet. The Jedi Order ceased to exist. Those few that remained went into exile, unwilling to endanger others with their presence. With the Jedi destroyed, however, the Sith Triumvirate splintered. Nihilus and Sion allied against Traya, cutting her off from the Force and exiling her, each proclaiming themselves the new Dark Lord of the Sith. They then went their separate ways, dividing the Sith remnants between them as they hunted down the last of the Jedi. As Nihilus and Sion sought to win their war with the Jedi, Darth Traya, taking up the name Kreia, sought out Mitra Surik, a Jedi exile who had lost her connection to the Force in the Battle of Malachor 5. Kreia's fall had led her to become disillusioned with the Sith as well as the Jedi. Indeed, she'd begun to hate the Force itself. In Surik, Kreia saw someone who was strong enough to live without the Force, and she hoped to get the exile to agree with her newfound views. But Kreia wasn't the only one looking for the exile. Sion and Nihilus believed her to be the last Jedi, and they sought to kill her and finish off the Jedi once and for all. Sion chased Kreia and the exile to Paragus II. They managed to escape his grasp and flee the system. As Sion tried to stop them from escaping Paragus, he ignited the system's volatile asteroid belt, destroying the entire planet in an enormous chain reaction. This endangered the Telos Restoration Project, which was vital to the Republic's continued existence. Telos, which had been destroyed by the Sith during the Jedi Civil War, was a test to see if destroyed worlds could be terraformed back to life, and the future of the Republic depended on the success of its restoration project. Unfortunately, Telos was entirely dependent on Paragian fuel, and after the destruction of Paragus, the future of the project was uncertain. To make matters worse, Nihilus's faction of the Sith had allied with General Vaklu of Onderon, a power-hungry man who wanted to overthrow his cousin, Queen Talia of Aziz, and secede from the Republic. Knowing that the secession of Onderon would both severely weaken the Republic and make it an easy target for his hunger, Nihilus secretly backed Vaklu's secession efforts. He sent troops under a team of Sith Masters to the tomb of Freedom Nad on Duxon, where they carried out an arcane ritual that allowed the Sith to take control of the beasts of Onderon. When Vaklu made his move and civil war erupted on Aziz, the Sith led these beasts into battle alongside Vaklu's troops. Queen Talia didn't stand a chance, and if Onderon fell, neither did the Republic. However, the Sith's attempts to destabilize the Republic were ultimately thwarted by Mitra Surik. After escaping Praga, she set out to find the surviving Jedi Masters and convince them to unite against the Sith, gathering allies and stopping Sith plots along the way. Darth Nihilus sent his apprentice, Visas Ma, to assassinate the exile, but Visas ended up switching sides and joining the exile instead. Surik found solutions to many of Telos' problems and intervened in the Onderon Civil War, bringing about the defeat of General Vaklu and Nihilus' troops. She also confronted Darth Sion on Korriban, though their battle proved inconclusive. Unbeknownst to Surik, however, she was playing into Kreia's hands the whole time. When she gathered the surviving Jedi Masters on Dantooine, Kreia revealed her identity as Darth Traya and killed them all. She convinced the sole surviving Jedi Master, Atris, to embrace the dark side, and then gave Nihilus a false tip about a Jedi Academy on Telos. The exile and her allies raced to Telos just as Nihilus' fleet began an attack on the planet. Telos seemed doomed, but beyond all hope, Mitra Surik managed to save the day once more. She defeated and apprehended Atris, led the allies she had gathered along the way in a desperate defense of Telos, and then she and Visas boarded Nihilus' flagship, the Ravager. There, Nihilus tried to consume Surik, but he found himself unable to touch her due to her severance from the Force. With Visas' help, Surik then attacked and destroyed the Lord of Hunger. With Telos safe and the Republic's future secure, Surik and her allies travelled to Malachor 5 to stop Kreia, who sought to amplify the wound in the Force there to cut off the galaxy from the Force. Surik single-handedly fought her way through the Trace Academy, which Kreia had usurped control of. She convinced Darth Sion to end his cycle of pain and embrace death, and then confronted and defeated Kreia. Surik then ordered the reactivation of the mass shadow generator, which destroyed Malachor 5 for good and cleansed the wound in the Force there. Between the Battle of Telos and the destruction of Malachor 5, the last remnants of Revan's Sith Empire were destroyed, and by 3950 BBY, the Dark Wars were over. Yet again, the Republic and the Jedi had won against all odds. But Surik's journey and the fight against the Sith didn't end at Malachor. As Malachor broke apart, Mitra Surik travelled into the unknown regions in search of Revan himself. There, she discovered that, though Malachor 5 was no more and the Sith Empire had ceased to exist, the threat of the dark side still remained. Because the Masters of the Jedi Council had been right all those years ago. There had been something darker behind the Mandalorian Wars, an evil force waiting for the Jedi to come and find it. Before they began their own crusade against the Republic, Revan and Malak had discovered it, and all Revan had done had been in preparation for it. His campaign was just a foretaste of the real war, a war of belief that had been going on for thousands of years, and he had fought to harden the galaxy against an evil beyond comprehension. Because the Sith, the true Sith, were waiting in the dark. They had been biding their time for over 1,000 years. But as Malachor 5 broke apart, their return was near at hand. Revan had left to fight them, and the exile went to join him, but not even they could prevent the war that was to come. But that's a story for another time, namely next week when we release the next chapter in the history of the Sith. But what do you think? Who's your favourite member of the Sith Triumvirate? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching and hope to see you in the next video.